history rarely produces a figure whose name alone can freeze the room. Vlad the Impaler was one of them. Long before myth transformed him into a monster, he was a real ruler forged in a world collapsing under invasion, betrayal, and fear. His rise was not an accident of birth. It was a collision of brutality and brilliance, the making of a leader who understood that survival in 15th century Wallachia required a will stronger than steel and a heart hardened by loss. He was the child taken hostage by an empire, the prince returning to a shattered homeland, the ruler who discovered that mercy could be fatal and hesitation could erase a nation overnight. Europe would come to whisper his name with dread, but his people remembered him as the one who stood when every other wall had fallen. His story matters because it forces a confrontation with a timeless question. When the world is governed by violence, what does it take to protect a country on the brink of extinction? The stakes surrounding Vlad were not political abstractions, they were survival. Every decision he made carried the weight of an entire kingdom, watching the horizon for an enemy that never slept. Every act of ruthlessness, every calculated display of terror was shaped by a landscape where weakness invited conquest. Understanding him requires stepping into that world of shifting loyalties and impossible choices, where the boundary between defender and destroyer narrowed to a blade's edge. Vlad the Impaler was not born a legend. He became one through fire, captivity, revolt, and a relentless determination to reclaim what was taken from him. To follow his life is to trace the anatomy of power under siege, the psychology of a ruler shaped by trauma and resolve, and the legacy of a man whose shadow still stretches across continents. So the real question is not why he inspired fear. It is why, after 5 centuries, the world still cannot look away. The world into which Vlad the Impaler was born was one defined by uncertainty, a borderland where rival empires clashed and loyalty shifted like the seasons. Wallachia, his homeland, sat trapped between the rising force of the Ottoman Empire and the ambitions of the Hungarian crown. It was a territory small in size, yet immense in consequence, a fragile state whose rulers survived only through calculated alliances and a constant readiness for war. Into this volatile landscape, in the winter of 1431, Vlad III entered history as the son of Vlad II Dracula, a man sworn to defend Christian Europe and bound by oath to a militant brotherhood known as the Order of the Dragon. From the moment of his birth, the expectations placed upon him were heavy, and the dangers surrounding him were even heavier. Vlad's earliest years were shaped by the aura of his father, a prince who navigated political tension with sharp instinct, but lived under the shadow of Ottoman dominance. The boy observed a world where diplomacy was not a formal negotiation, but a survival tactic, and where a ruler's smile often hid a blade. The environment of the princely court taught him early that trust was a luxury few could afford. These impressions formed the bedrock of his psychological world. Suspicion became second nature, and vigilance grew into a defining part of his temperament. Even as a child, he learned that the walls around him protected little. Threats often came from within. The family into which he was born was fragmented by loyalty and rivalry. His elder brother, Mircea, carried the responsibilities of the firstborn with a calm intelligence, while his younger brother, Radu, possessed a diplomatic charm that would later become both an asset and a weapon. Their mother, whose role remains obscured in the fog of limited historical record, existed largely at the margins of political life, overshadowed by the dominance of their father's public obligations. The princely household was less a home than a battlefield of unspoken expectations. As the sons of a ruler, they were raised not for comfort, but for conflict. From a young age, Vlad was exposed to the contradictions of leadership, the duty to protect and the willingness to sacrifice, the facade of civility and the reality of brutality. The political climate around him was in constant flux. Hungarian influence pushed from the west, Ottoman pressure weighed from the east, and within Wallachia itself, rival noble families, the boyars, shifted alliances with alarming speed. Children in such an environment did not enjoy innocence. They inherited conflict. Vlad absorbed this instability, turning it into a fierce internal resolve. He developed a rigid understanding of loyalty, sharpened by the betrayal and instability he witnessed even before adolescence. His formative years were not defined by a single traumatic event, but by a continuous exposure to geopolitical tension. Wallachia was a land where armies marched regularly, where plague and famine punctuated the seasons, and where the line between ally and enemy blurred. Vlad saw the consequences of weakness long before he understood its causes. He watched as nobles plotted behind closed doors, as foreign envoys arrived bearing gifts with hidden motives, and as the threat of invasion shaped every decision his father made. This environment taught him that power was not a steady possession, but a fragile agreement, maintained only by fear and respect. The seeds of his later ruthlessness took root here, not from a desire for cruelty, but from the conviction that only strength could preserve what he loved. The turning point of his early life came when he was still just a boy. In 1442, his father was compelled to offer Vlad and his younger brother, Radu, as hostages to the Ottoman Empire as a condition for political cooperation. The exchange was framed as diplomacy, but Vlad understood it immediately as a reminder of Wallachia's vulnerability. The journey to Edirne, the Ottoman capital, marked the end of his childhood and the beginning of his psychological transformation. Forced into a foreign court, he discovered that captivity did not always mean chains. Sometimes it meant living among enemies who treated him with unexpected courtesy, yet never let him forget that he was a pawn in a larger game. During his years under Ottoman control, Vlad experienced a world vastly different from the one he had known. The empire around him was disciplined, expansive, and deeply strategic. He learned languages, military tactics, and the mechanisms of power from the inside. Yet, the knowledge came at a price. He lived with the constant awareness that any misstep by his father back home could cost him his life. The uncertainty bred a hardened, defensive worldview. He witnessed the punishment of deserters, the training of janissaries, and the mechanisms of a political system held together by fear as much as loyalty. These experiences carved into him a sense of authority grounded not in affection, but in absolute control. Radu, by contrast, adapted more easily. His charm won the favor of their captors, while Vlad's defiance deepened their suspicion. The difference between the brothers widened as the years passed, one shaped by diplomacy, the other by resistance. This divergence created a tension that would later erupt into full political rivalry. For Vlad, captivity was not merely a period of waiting. It was a crucible that refined his understanding of dominance. He learned that respect could be commanded, but obedience was built through consequences. These lessons would return with devastating force when he gained power. Despite the harshness of his circumstances, Vlad was never passive. He observed, he analyzed, he stored every humiliation and every moment of vulnerability deep within himself. When news reached him that his father and older brother had been betrayed and killed by political rivals at home, something fundamental within him shifted. Trust, already fragile, shattered completely. He internalized the belief that mercy was a weakness exploited by the ambitious. The boy who had once watched the world from behind palace walls became a young man convinced that survival required a colder approach to leadership. By the time Vlad returned to Wallachia, he was no longer a child formed by the land of his birth, but a product of two worlds, one that taught him fear, and another that taught him how to wield it. His early life had been a collection of harsh lessons delivered before he could fully understand them. Yet those lessons built the foundation of the ruler he would become. Disciplined, unforgiving, and shaped by the belief that loyalty must be commanded through strength and stability maintained through decisive force. His background did not merely influence his future, it defined it. The conflicts he witnessed, the captivity he endured, and the losses he suffered became the architecture of a personality forged for a brutal era. To understand the Vlad the world would later fear, one must first understand the child who learned far too early that survival belonged to those willing to make the hardest choices. When Vlad returned to Wallachia after years of captivity, he stepped into a political landscape carved by treachery. The throne that rightfully belonged to his family had become a prize fought over by rival factions, foreign powers, and opportunists who thrived in the instability of the region. His father's death at the hands of boyars and the murder of his brother Mircea were not distant tragedies. They were forces shaping every step he took. Vlad did not merely seek power. He sought retribution, restoration, and the reclamation of a homeland swallowed by chaos. His first attempt at securing the throne in 1448 was brief and unstable. Installed by the Ottomans as a strategic puppet, he found himself surrounded by enemies on all sides. Hungarian interference, Wallachian boyars who despised his lineage, and an Ottoman Empire that viewed him with suspicion due to his hostile temperament during captivity. His short-lived rule ended almost as quickly as it began. Vlad fled to Moldavia, defeated yet not broken. That defeat became a turning point, sharpening his understanding of political dynamics and teaching him the critical difference between taking power and keeping it. Years later, with shifting alliances and growing strength, Vlad seized the throne once more in 1456. This time, the prince who returned was not the uncertain ruler of his youth, but a hardened strategist with a clear vision for rebuilding Wallachia. The land he inherited was fractured, economically drained, politically divided, and militarily vulnerable. To secure it, Vlad believed he needed not only authority, but absolute authority. And so began the chapter of his life that would define his legacy. One of his earliest moves was the elimination of the boyar class responsible for the murder of his family. Vlad saw their disloyalty as the root of Wallachia's instability. At a feast famously recounted in chronicles, he invited the boyars to a celebration, then had many impaled or forced into labor to rebuild fortresses. This was not a simple act of revenge. It was a calculated reshaping of Wallachia's power structure. He replaced corrupt nobility with individuals loyal to the crown, reducing the influence of clans that had destabilized the region for generations. Through these brutal reforms, he centralized power in a way no Wallachian ruler had achieved before. His rule, though marked by severity, brought undeniable order. Corruption decreased, crime diminished, and the economy began to stabilize. Travelers wrote of being able to leave gold coins along the roadside without fear of theft, a testament to the authority he enforced. Vlad understood that fear was a tool, and he wielded it with precision. To him, justice was only effective when it was swift, public, and unforgettable. The forests of impaled criminals that lined Wallachian roads were more than displays of cruelty. They were signals to enemies and citizens alike that the prince tolerated no disorder. But Vlad's reign was not defined solely by internal reform. The greatest test came from the growing power of the Ottoman Empire. Their demand for tribute from Wallachia symbolized subjugation, a reality Vlad refused to accept. His refusal was an open act of defiance, a declaration that Wallachia would no longer bow. When Ottoman envoys arrived and declined to remove their turbans before him, citing religious practice, Vlad ordered the turbans nailed to their skulls. The message was unmistakable. Submission had no place in his court. His resistance escalated into open conflict. In 1462, the Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed II himself, the conqueror of Constantinople, launched a massive campaign to crush Vlad's rebellion. Outnumbered and facing an empire of unprecedented military scale, Vlad turned to tactics that revealed the depth of his strategic mind. He waged psychological warfare, poisoned wells, burned fields, and carried out night raids that terrorized enemy camps. The most infamous moment of this campaign occurred when Mehmed's forces marched toward Targovishte and found themselves confronted with the Forest of the Impaled, a vast plain filled with tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers, deserters, and criminals displayed on stakes. Chroniclers recorded that Mehmed himself was shaken by the sight. It was a macabre demonstration of Vlad's resolve and a stark warning that any invasion would be met with unimaginable cost. The night attack at Targovishte, one of his greatest military achievements, showcased his unconventional brilliance. Under cover of darkness, Vlad's forces infiltrated the Ottoman camp in an attempt to assassinate the Sultan. The attack failed to kill Mehmed, but inflicted chaos and heavy losses. The audacity of the assault forced the Ottomans into retreat, at least temporarily, and preserved Wallachia from immediate conquest. Though he could not defeat the empire outright, he made clear that Wallachia would not be subdued without considerable resistance. Despite military successes, Vlad's reign was constantly undermined by political betrayal. His brother Radu, favored by the Ottomans, became the centerpiece of a rival campaign to control Wallachia. Noble families, weary of Vlad's harsh discipline, shifted allegiance to Radu, viewing him as a softer alternative who promised stability without terror. Vlad was eventually forced into exile, first seeking support from Hungary, only to be imprisoned by King Matthias Corvinus for political convenience. His imprisonment lasted over a decade, during which Europe continued to reshape its perception of him. German pamphlets circulated exaggerated tales of his cruelty, some mixing fact with sensationalism to serve political narratives. While these stories damaged his reputation in the West, they inadvertently cemented his legend in global memory. Meanwhile, supporters in Wallachia and Transylvania continued to view him as a defender against Ottoman encroachment, not a tyrant. Vlad eventually returned to power briefly in 1476, but the landscape had changed irreversibly. Allies were fewer, enemies stronger, and Wallachia remained caught between empires. His final rule was short-lived. He died in battle, fighting as he had lived, with unwavering ferocity, unshaken by the prospect of death. Vlad's career was a paradox of brutality and strategic brilliance, a life defined by the relentless pursuit of stability in a world that offered none. His achievements, centralizing power, resisting Ottoman domination, restoring internal order, were overshadowed only by the extreme methods he employed. Yet, for a land trapped between giants, his harshness carved out a brief but unforgettable moment of sovereignty. His legacy as a ruler was born not simply from the fear he inspired, but from the resolve with which he defended a nation always one step from collapse. Beyond the battlefield and the throne room, Vlad the Impaler's personal life was shaped by forces that shadowed him long before he held power. His early years in captivity had carved a deep division between his public ruthlessness and his private vulnerability. He carried the memory of betrayal like an old scar, a constant reminder that even those closest to him could become instruments of his downfall. This mindset influenced every relationship he formed, including those within his own family. The bond with his younger brother Radu, once a shared childhood connection, hardened into rivalry when Radu embraced Ottoman influence. What began as two boys navigating captivity became a lifelong struggle for legitimacy, loyalty, and the soul of Wallachia. His internal world was equally shaped by grief. The deaths of his father and brother Mircea were not distant historical events, but deeply personal tragedies. Knowing they were murdered by nobles who later expected his cooperation fueled his relentless pursuit of justice, however brutal. This trauma also left Vlad with an enduring sense of isolation. He learned early that the throne was not a seat of honor, but a lonely battleground where affection could be exploited and compassion mistaken for frailty. As a result, he built emotional walls as formidable as the fortresses he restored. Details of Vlad's marriage remain partially obscured by history, yet accounts suggest moments of genuine tenderness amid his otherwise unforgiving life. His first wife, whose identity varies in sources, reportedly died by suicide during an Ottoman siege, choosing death over capture. Her loss reinforced his conviction that the world he inhabited offered no mercy. His later marriage into the Hungarian nobility reflected both political alignment and his attempt to secure a semblance of stability. Still, even within these relationships, Vlad struggled to reconcile the need for intimacy with a worldview built on distrust. He could command armies with ease, but the unpredictability of human connection remained a battlefield he never fully mastered. Vlad's greatest internal conflict lay between the man he believed he needed to be and the man he might have been under different circumstances. Contemporary accounts describe him as fiercely disciplined, habitually austere, and capable of both intense loyalty and sudden violence. These contradictions stemmed from the environment that shaped him, years spent living under threat, surrounded by enemies, and forced into alliances dictated by survival. His mind became conditioned to expect danger, turning fear into a strategic advantage, but costing him the softness that might have offered personal peace. The pressures of ruling a fractured nation deepened these internal struggles. Every decision carried the risk of rebellion or invasion. Every alliance demanded compromise. Every demonstration of power risked creating more enemies than it eliminated. Vlad bore these burdens with rigid determination, often at the expense of his emotional well-being. He was a ruler constantly surrounded by people, yet fundamentally alone. His final years reflected this ongoing tension. Returning from imprisonment in Hungary, he attempted once again to rebuild Wallachia, this time with fewer allies and greater resistance. The energy that once fueled his rise now struggled against fatigue and diminishing trust. Even as he prepared for his last battles, the weight of betrayal hung over him. Reports suggest his death came during combat against Ottoman forces, perhaps due to mistaken identity or deliberate treachery. Whether truth or legend, his end mirrored his life. A ruler engulfed in conflict, shaped by loyalty's fragile nature and power's unforgiving demands. In the private moments of his life, Vlad grappled with a truth few rulers admitted. Strength could protect a nation, but it could not shield the man behind the crown from the cost of wielding it. Conclusion: centuries after his death, Vlad the Impaler remains one of history's most polarizing figures, a ruler remembered as both a national defender and a symbol of terror. His legacy endures because it confronts the uncomfortable reality of leadership in an age ruled by violence. He inherited a land on the brink of collapse and dared to hold it together through discipline, defiance, and uncompromising resolve. Though his methods remain the subject of moral debate, his impact is undeniable. He halted the advance of a powerful empire, reshaped Wallachia's political order, and left behind a legacy carved into both memory and myth. The lessons drawn from his life are complex. First, he demonstrated that leadership requires clarity of purpose, even when the path is difficult or unpopular. Second, he revealed the danger of allowing fear and trauma to dominate decision-making. Strength without balance can protect a realm yet isolate the ruler. Finally, his story reminds us that history often transforms real people into symbols, simplifying lives built from hardship, conflict, and impossible choices. Vlad was neither the monster legends portray, nor the saint nationalists celebrate. He was a ruler forged by a brutal era, shaped by forces he did not choose, and defined by the relentless struggle to defend a fragile homeland. And that is why, centuries later, the world still speaks his name,